From wherever in the world you're joining this live stream today, a heartfelt and warm welcome from me at home in West London and from our hosts and organisers, the Commonwealth Foundation and the Ameena Gafoor Institute for the Study of Indentureship and its Legacies. My name is Maria Del Pilar Caladine. I am an academic and writer based at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies in London, specialising in the study of the history of indenture. Like many of you who've joined us today, I'm also a descendant of Indian indentured labourers. And so it's a great privilege for me to be hosting this event, the first of its kind, in which writers have taken archival materials and works of fiction to produce short monologues based on the lives of the indentured. These will be performed today by actors Sunak Kundu, Vanessa Beesoondial, and Tanmay Dhanania. The monologues form part of the indentured histories of South Africa, Mauritius, and Guyana. The system of indenture, created in the aftermath of the abolition of slavery in the British Empire, could be a brutal and carceral form of unfree labour. Indian men, women, and children were frequently recruited under false or exaggerated pretenses and taken to colonies across the British Empire. Today, we focus on three stories, two from the archives of indenture in Guyana and Mauritius, and one a fictionalized account from South Africa. It's with great pleasure that I'm able to announce that two of the writers of our monologues have joined me live today. So thank you and welcome to Poonam Sitahul from Mauritius and Anirudh Singh from South Africa.
Thank you so much, Maria, for having us here.
No, that's lovely, Poonam. A warm welcome to you and a very, very warm welcome to Anirudh also. And I'm
Thank you.
Hi, Anirudh.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. How you say, sharing my little story.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Our final contributor, Guyana-born Ellie Nyland, was unable to be with us live, but I'm pleased to say that I have pre-recorded an interview with her and I'll be sharing it with you today. Please post questions for Poonam and Anirudh in the chat and I'll put these to them on your behalf after the monologues. Let's move on then to the first of our monologues, adapted by Anirudh Singh from his own short story, A Passage from India, which first appeared in the 2018 anthology, We Mark Your Memory, Stories from the Descendants of Indenture. We join our protagonist as he recounts his childhood journey from India to South Africa. And this part of the story begins as he learns mid-voyage that he is now to make the journey alone as his older brother has fallen overboard and drowned. Please do note that the following video makes reference to sexual and physical assault and as such may be distressing or unsuitable for some of our viewers.
Eyes open or closed, I see the devil captain. Remember all his war, even up to today. He says, I am Finn, the master of the SS and more. You want a drink, boy? I am so thirsty and hungry, but I can't drink blood. I need water. The captain shows his dirty teeth. Go on. It's good wine. Cabernet Sauvignon, made from grapes. I am sorry you lost your brother overboard. I close my eyes. I am a man now. Even without the Pandit doing the Purusho Diksha. The captain pours into his fancy glass, saying, drink up. See, it won't kill you. He sips and makes. I am so thirsty. Will even drink this. I swallow a little of the red stuff. It's sour, like lemon or lime. The captain The captain slaps his thigh, shakes his head, shakes his body like he is in a trance. He sees my eyes, must be white like boiled eggs from just looking at the roasted meat. I have never eaten ghost before. My teeth make noise. I open my right hand. The brown thing falls on the ground. The captain says, "Ah, you see that?" The captain, pointing his finger, thick like a cucumber. "That's a wine bottle stopper made from the cork." The captain takes the brown thing and puts it in a jug of water. Ha! It floats like the Jagassur's banana shaped fishing boat. I am thinking now of Jhora swept away by a big wave made by the Parameshwara's giant hand no one can see. He would be like a tiny little cork in a cold boiling water, where because it is black like coal, he can't see anything. Tears come fast without sound. The captain eats like a baby, spit falling from his mouth with his left hand. Chee! He offers me a piece of ghost. Masterji moves both his hands like a fowl's wings, makes noise. I laugh. The captain makes his blue eyes big, says, "It's chicken, won't poison you." I grab what the sahib calls a drumstick and eat like Choda when he has had nothing for a week. The captain asks, "Know where you are, boy?" I am eating so fast I can't talk or think of anything else. I lift and drop my shoulders. The captain opens a long rolled up paper that has pictures on it, puts his thick finger on one place. "Port Natal. The Enmore will land here in about 8 days, around the end of August in the year of our Lord 1874. With him and Davy Jones willing, of course." The captain laughs like a donkey. Masterji puts his hairy hand with black spots on mine. I pull back, he grips it tight, taps it slowly with the other one. The captain drinks from a lamba glass, making lots of noise. "Good to see you smiling, lad. We set out with 342 coolies. I'll be mightily pleased if no more are lost overboard." He hits my back. Something goes straight down my stomach. I cough. "If I weren't contracted to deliver you to Hanson, I would keep you as my cabin boy. You beautiful, stinking creature. Now it's time for your bath." I blink. The captain starts taking off his clothes. Only my mother and few friends has seen me naked when we bathe in the Jamuna river. But the captain is a good man. He took and fed me, gave me that thing they call cork. The Angrezi are not like us poor Indians. They throw away things. We have nothing to give. We keep everything. Captain, 3 times bigger than me. His body red, covered all over with hair. He holds my hand and pulls me into a small room where on the floor there is a bath full of warm water. He carries and puts me in there like I am a baby. The Captain wipes and washes me like my mother used to. Last thing I remember is his blue eyes and his hairful face.
Well, I'm pleased to say that we have lawyer and writer Anirudh Singh here with us today. Anirudh, it's wonderful that you were able to join us. And I very much wanted to begin by asking you why you think it's important that we still, 100 years after the abolition of the system of indenture, find creative ways to share, to engage, and to represent this history.
Well, thank you. I think the cliche is, if you don't know where you have come from, you wouldn't know where you're going to. So in a sense, the pioneers left behind a few thousand years old culture to come to the dark continent, and perhaps spurred by false promises of gold and diamonds and so on. But the reality was different. We got citizenship over 110 years later. So while there is a lot of archival material, there's not much that brings to life the actual horrible story of the voyage of between 4 and 6 weeks. And then life in South Africa in particular followed the apartheid regime following the colonial one until 1994. So for 342 years, we were the governed and not part of government. So that was a lesson in humility, in hard work, placing value on education and property ownership. And that is how we, the descendants, have survived.
Thank you, Anirudh. Just bringing you specifically onto this history of indenture, we can think of, as descendants of indentured labourers, we can think of that voyage, which you honed in on that story, as a point of loss. And I wonder, I wanted just to ask you to briefly reflect generally on the idea of loss as it related to that journey for Indian indentured labourers.
The loss, I would say, was moving from the known, that is India, where in the rural areas at that time, there was widespread starvation. So you either stay and die of hunger, or you go into the unknown, where you've got lions and giraffes that were not seen in India. So it was more a spirit of adventure. We have to go forward or we will lose this opportunity. So that was the kind of incentive, even though false, but people were such that they burned the boats. They had the opportunity to return after 5 years, but about 80% of them decided, no, they'll make the most of South Africa, and that was Port Natal. So in a way, a sense of loss of culture, village communities, their togetherness, and so on, and being dumped on the eastern coast of Africa among strangers, practically. So one made the most of that, and there was no going back.
Anirudh, thank you so much. And we're going to have a chance to put some questions from the audience to you shortly, but thank you so much for that contribution. Many thanks.
Thank you.
We move now to our second film, a monologue written by educator and theatre practitioner Poonam Sitahol. To provide some background, the historical basis for this writer's work is the 1838 testimony of a Muslim woman, Bibee Zuhoorun, who indentured from India to Mauritius. On her return to India, she testified before an inquiry that had been set up to investigate the very early abuses that had begun to take place since the system's inception in Mauritius in 1834. These included kidnappings and false representations in India, but as we will see here, also extended to plantation abuses in Mauritius. Again, please do note that the following video makes reference to sexual and physical assault, and as such may be distressing or unsuitable for some of our viewers.
I do not know what it was like in the other plantations, because we could not leave ours. The city was out of bounds too, but it did not matter. I had no friends from my land, no money, and I knew nothing of the country here. Stranded. I kept serving my master, but was paid not one paise. At first, I thought that the money was being saved, but I would be paid at one go in the first year like the British men would do. But I went 2.5 years working without wages. And at stake, my izzat. Dr. Boilo wanted to have a connection with me and make me his Raquel, mistress. Allah is my witness. I speak the truth. This is haram. I had crossed the black waters, left behind husband and country, and now this. 3 times I mustered courage and went to the police. All 3 times I was sent back. They would not listen to me. French police officers, magistrates, all his countrymen, all corrupt money eaters. I begged to leave and said I will not work for Dr. Boilo. The police took me back to Les Salines every single time. And every single time, I was slapped, beaten, and kicked by my master because I would not have a connection with him. And once, Dr. Boilo ran a needle into my breast. It drew blood. Reduced. But even then, I would not give in to his haram demands. If the police would not help, maybe a woman would. My last hope was Dr. Boilo's wife. I ran off to Tamare, told Madame Boilo about her husband's advances, but I will not go back to Les Salines. She confronted her husband and said she would break the marriage. Her father intervened and matters were settled between husband and wife. And again, Dr. Boilo asked me back at Les Salines. Kya parishani? I, Bibee Zuhoorun, a Musalmani, had to get away from that man. Where could I go? in that strange land, I had no means, no paisa. The police had said to just do as I was told. Do? For what? I had come to Mauritius to get decent wages. Bus. Not even the food was as promised. What is food amidst all that? Stranded. Reduced. Dehumanized. I was not the only one in Dr. Boileau's crib. About that time, he had 40 of his men, all coolies in the House of Correction. The House of Correction is the place they send you to when you refuse to do what they want. The Indian laborers there had refused to work for Dr. Boileau, tired of our mister's persistent exploitation. And that was where I was put to. I swore that I would not stay, nor work at Les Salines, come what may. Once, my master came with a promise. Stay another 2.5 years, and you'll get your wages. Arey bus! 2.5 years more. Even if you were to cut my throat for not staying, I will not stay. I'd rather go back to Calcutta. That's what I told him. But Allah is my witness. In this year, 1838, I, Bibee Zuhoorun, speak but the truth.
Thanks so much to all of our actors and directors for the outstanding job that they've done. Poonam, thank you so much for being here with us today. If I could focus you for a second on your role as an educator, I wanted to ask you if there's a general awareness amongst young people in Mauritius of the role that the system of indenture played in the country's history.
Actually, I would say that, yes, there is a general awareness among young people on the role of indenture in Mauritius. And this has helped a lot to shape how Mauritius is today. And I do feel there is a lot that is being done because much of indenture history is already mentioned in history books right from primary school. I know that there are pioneering research that is happening, and then there are also independent researchers that are working on the issue also. And there are also like 2 organizations that I can already mention. It's Pravasigat and the Mahatma Gandhi Institute that are doing a lot to disseminate information about indenture history. But then I do feel that we need to delve deeper into our history because when we are talking about young people, then we will need to make the story and history actually more accessible, appealing, relevant, and more touching to them. Because whether we like it or not, young people nowadays tend to be detached to history, and that's not just a local phenomenon. So how do we get the stories close to them and get history closer to them? I think it's by bringing in compelling stories. And I'm thinking here of Bibee Zuhoorun's story, for example. And we need real life accounts, lived experiences of people who have been through that system, and the need to go beyond facts so that we can bridge a certain gap between knowledge, research, and its dissemination. And I do think that stories have the power to actually create empathy and bring more sympathy among young people. And we will definitely need to make that shift from a more general awareness to something that is more informed and responsible in terms of awareness. And that's where I think that it comes like a shared responsibility, not only from historians, but educators too, but also artists and playwrights, so that history can be more appealing to young people and then less daunting to them as well. And that will help a lot for the young people to connect their past, to connect to their past and understand their present better. And I would also go further by saying that probably that will help to consolidate the Mauritian identity too, by getting to know more about the indenture history.
Poonam, thank you so much for that articulate answer. I wanted to, having seen what you produced, which to me was really moving and very, very powerful. I wondered if you, as a theatre practitioner, having now kind of read Bibee's testimony, how do you feel? Is it an attractive thing to you? You know, the idea of a longer script, of a wider performance about her life. Do you think it could be a suitable? Do you think it could be a suitable subject for a theatrical performance? Or?
I cannot help smiling at this because yes, actually, it's definitely my immediate response would be yes to this because I've already been toying with this idea of an adaptation. And I remember reading through Bibee Zuhoorun's story at the start. It felt really exciting and a real eye-opener because we had never come across the story. It was a bit of disbelief that the story was out there, and especially that she happens to be one of the earliest female voices in indenture history. That makes it still more special. And as I was reading through her testimony, it was a lot of images that came flooding in. It was the character, it was familiar places that she was talking about. And I think as a dramatist, I could easily visualize what was going on and thinking about putting it in a more dramatic form. Now, I think also Bibee Zuhoorun's testimony would appeal to a lot of writers because she has all the ingredients of a good story. And for stage, whether for stage or film. And because it's about the story about this very strong character who has aspirations, she is sold a dream, and then she makes a choice, stands up for that choice in the face of adversity, like she has to face exploitation, ill treatment, and so on, and that's for about 2.5 years, which is a lot. So her story is very much rooted in truth, identity, and history. And these are elements that would really talk to writers, and I think it would appeal also to the 21st century audience. And I think the need to...
Sorry, Poonam, I have to stop and just jump in and interrupt you there, but we're going to come back, hold that thought, because we're going to come back to you for a longer chat when I bring you back with Anirudh. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us there. As I said, we're going to be hearing more from Poonam and Anirudh later, and I do encourage you to post questions in the chat so that I can put them to our writers on your behalf. We come now to our final piece, inspired by a fascinating figure from Guyanese history, the indentured labourer Beesoondial. Beesoondial arrived in Guyana in 1894, and in 1896, prompted by the murder and wounding of indentured labourers during a plantation uprising, he began a series of letters to the press, the colonial press, publicly accusing the plantocracy of mistreating the labourers and breaching their contractual obligations. As a result of these letters, he was invited to testify in front of a colonial commission on the sugar industry. And in 1898, Beesoondial left, he was invited to give testimony in front of a royal commission on the sugar industry in 1898. Beesoondial left Guyana in 1901, and in the course of my PhD research, I was able to find evidence that he travelled to Fiji But the story of what happened to him next, like his character, is full of unknowns.
Here in Guyana, they call this woman rain. Once it start, it nah stop. White rain, Bechu rain, it nah stop. Well, yes, I have some fame. Bechu has some fame. They beat us, they killed us, but nobody listened till I spoke, until I wrote. And I wrote plenty, as they say. After that blasted Immigration Ordinance Act, things were meant to improve. We grew roots waiting. Coolies lament their low pay and extra tasks. Overseers rape and kill women and little girls, but them nah listen. Till some of them, on non-parole estate, hustled to the Agent General's office. When they come back, the police start without warning. Mercilessly shot 5 people dead, 59 injured. That man who complained about that overseer who abducted and forced himself on his wife, they shot him dead. Who could protest after that? Who could confront them? But I, Bechu, fired back. Belly burned, anger boiled. I wrote letters to the newspaper to lodge my complaint, fired them off again and again. 4.5 years. Recorded and reported every damn thing wrong with this place. How the ragged coolie workers are threatened with buckshot, threatened to accept wage reductions. How the indentured coolies live under subjection, abuse and threat, forced to accept optional task works. How the managers and overseers are evil. How they keep the children, poor little mites, out in the fields in the gangs for 13 hours each day. I quote them the law, the Immigration Ordinance section, this and that. Man, how my friends do laugh at that. And I shame them about the immoral relations that some overseers and managers have with our coolie females. Record who, when, where. Report the immigration agents who close their eyes to such matters with blind-hearted disregard. They try to silence me. Me, with my matchless gumption, hauled me to court to sue me for libel, which stopped me for a while. But then, case dismissed. So I opened fire once more. Then some of them question if I'm even real. Bitter-tongued they write, "Who is this Bechu? Is he really an indentured immigrant? He's far better educated than most of us are, but what the dickens did he come here for?" And another newspaper attacked me. But I know how to dissect them. I write back again and again, like a Nancy, outsmarting them all. They took me seriously in the end. Called me to give evidence at the Royal Commission. That chairman, Sir Henry Norman, he must have thought of me as one of those Dickens characters. Me, The poor young orphan boy raised by a kindly missionary lady in Calcutta until she passed. A ripe young boy then, handed on to work to this and that gentleman. And there were many gentlemen, as something or other or whatnot. But of course, you'd want to stop and dwell here a while on my reduced circumstances. Yes, it's natural for you to wonder how, at the age of 36, Bechu was tricked into coming to Guyana. How the orphan boy became a coolie man. How he became a witness for the Royal Commission. How such a man can charm the carrion crow of a carcass, eh? But that's not the best part of the story. Listen now. That same year as the Royal Commission, I had my commutation of indentureship. Unleashed. Unbound. A writer at the end of his sentence, tell me Dickens did not write that himself. Of course, I argued that I should not even need to be freed. But in the end, Bechu was bound no more. There's nothing here for me now. Maybe I'll go back to India or to England to complete my education. I must keep up my writing campaign though. The battle is not yet won.
While we don't have Ellie Nyland, the writer of that piece, with us live today, I did have a chance to catch up with her about the process of bringing Bechu to life.
Well, let me start by saying he was a very compelling character. And what attracted me was, as a writer, you want to know what is unknown. Writers are always trying to fill a gap, yeah? And then I couldn't believe that he set out to be in Trinidad for 3 years and then was indentured for 5 years in British Guyana. And as I read a little bit more, I was fascinated that he went to the Royal Commission and gave evidence and it made me very, very proud, that testimony. Followed by that, I became interested in the relentless abuse that was being exposed, the indentured workers, and that was an added draw. Then I was outraged, as he probably was. Those lingering images, they're distressing, but I love that he could pit his intellect against the colonial masters, that plantation economy. He really was an agent for reform, I thought.
I wondered, kind of how you thought about him in terms of, in terms of the Caribbean qualities. So if you saw elements of, even of the Anansi about him.
He created a mythology for himself, I feel. He tried to shape the narrative, especially when he was unbound at the end. And he had a huge pride about what he was doing. He said Dickens could have written that himself. Yes, an orphan that came good. Brilliant. He was definitely an Anansi figure.
I wondered if you as a writer had any particular ideas about what you thought prompted him to leave India?
we can only guess as to why he left India at such a late age. And from the way he wrote, you have to consider, was he a courtesan to gentlemen? Or did he have a sexual odyssey with many gentlemen? Because we know that when he was reminiscing in the script, he was a ripe young boy. And there's a just suggestion that perhaps he was overripe and no longer kept, because he did talk about his reduced circumstances at 36 years old, and he discreetly changes the subject quite covertly. There are also hints that he was not a huge, big, masculine man, because we're told he wasn't fit for field work. And there's so much unsaid as to why he left. And there is no evidence that he had a wife or children. They're not mentioned.
I feel he was an extraordinary person. There was something that you said earlier that
yes, I agree.
Said he was persistent. And
yes.
I really agree with that. And I think in some ways he was relentless when he was pursuing the plantocracy, because they would write back kind of thinking, oh, well, we've dealt with this. And he would fire off another letter. And I love that.
He set out to expose the condition of workers in British Guyana. And the Royal Commission, where he gave evidence, is 1897. We all know not much happens about anything for about 20 years. Yes, compelling, determined, he a champion really for workers. Yes, so Dickensian or an Nansian figure or a Gandhian figure, his education works. Yes, I love the expression firing off. And I wish I knew what happened to him when all his work was over and he left. I wish I knew. If he had arrived in Britain, we would have known. But maybe he went to Fiji, maybe he went back to India. It's just unsaid and quite mysterious.
That was lovely to hear from Ellie. If I could ask Poonam and Anirudh to join me now, so I can put a couple of questions to you, that would be wonderful. Hi, Anirudh.
Hello, I'm back.
Hi, Poonam. It's lovely to have you both here. I have a question that is directed at me, but I would like to ask it to both of you because I think you may have a more interesting answer. Somebody's asking about the idea of tracing roots, and I'm just wondering if that was sent out kind of in reference to the fact that you both responded so creatively to the history of indenture. So if I could ask you, Anirudh, first, have you ever kind of taken it upon yourself to do any research into your family, or are there known things already that were passed on to you by your grandparents or your parents?
Unfortunately not, but one member of my family has been doing research. Unfortunately, again, I was 3 when my grandfather died. My great-grandfather came to South Africa in 1863. So I'm a 3rd or 4th generation South African. And unfortunately also we were cut off from India. Imports and so on were stopped. And we created our own culture based on Hinduism and so on. And in that sense, I don't know too much and haven't bothered to trace my family ancestry because we call ourselves South Africans. And on that basis as well, while I read Roots and watched the series, I did not go back to see where we came from, although there has been a lot of research on indenture, much archival material since about 2000 or so. So much has been read, but not sort of dramatized by way of theater and so on. I think this is because many of our struggle heroes were banned by the apartheid regime. You could not quote them. They could not speak openly. Many of them were members of the Communist Party, and that party was also banned in 1951, I think. So we have many heroes that are unspoken of, unfortunately, and they have been also unheard of. So to answer your question, no, I did not. I think my family history would be similar to just about everybody's history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anirudh. Poonam, can I ask you the same question? I wonder if you have, I know amongst my India Guyanese community, a few people who've managed to trace their ancestral village, and some have even gone to India to go back to see the place their great-grandparents came from. Has that been part of your story at all, Poonam?
Personally, I haven't done it, but I know of people who have been through it, and I'm thinking of my own father, who has done a little bit of research. So there are two places where Mauritians can go to find information, and that's from Mahatma Gandhi Institute and Pravasigat. There, they are given documents where they can just try to see where they come from, and but then. For me personally, I feel that that's where we are limited, probably because we haven't. On my side, I haven't done much research, and then I think that's why probably projects like the Indentured Remembered matters, because that's, if we get live stories, probably that would matter more and touch people more to go and find out more about where they come from.
Thank you so much, Poonam. I had a question that asked. I'm gonna throw this out to you as well. But I had a question that asked why I had used the term unfree labour, and my answer to that really is when we are looking at this period of indenture, 1834 to 1917, we're looking at a series of contracts that were really made in many cases under false pretenses, where people were unaware of the distance of where they were traveling to, and we can never say, it would not be accurate to say that this system of indenture within this time frame was slavery. That is not correct, but it is correct to refer to it as unfree, in the sense that what I referred to before is the carceral nature of indentureship, of people being confined to estates, of frequently being tricked or cajoled or taken in positions of intense vulnerability to recruitment centres, as we saw in that same document in which Bibee's testimony comes from. There were also testimonies of kidnappings. So that's why I used that phrase, unfree labour. But I wondered if you had, Anirudh and Poonam, if you had anything that you wanted, as a result perhaps of your own personal research or your own kind of reflections in relation to writing the monologues. Did you have anything that you would like to share with the chatter who popped that question in the chat?
Yeah, thank you. I have written a 20-episode series on slave labor, and these are slaves, young men and women, kidnapped at the Bay of Bengal or parts of port cities or towns of South India from 1647. So the story sort of ends before 1834, before 1860, but it was disguised. It was slavery because they were not paid. And between 1647, they were captured, kidnapped, taken to Batavia, Jakarta, wherever, And on the way to Rio de Janeiro to work on the sugarcane plantations there, many died. And they were sold off at the Cape of Good Hope or the Cape of Storms because they fetched good prices, because many of them had skills, bricklayers, carpenters, maids or nannies, whatever. And that was more lucrative. But unfortunately, that kind of history is not documented. But recently, there have been court cases I have looked at around 1687 and so on, where the treatment of these Indian slaves was so atrocious. For example, a woman would be locked up at night in a stable. She would be abused by the slave owner. They would not be fed, just enough to keep them going the next day. They would be tied to a wagon and whipped for no apparent reason. A lot of these stories have not been documented. What we have in South Africa is archival material which doesn't really interest the young. I think one needs to bring the realities out, because in South Africa, it was suppressed. It was not part of history. It was not part of geography or anything like that, not taught at schools. And I think it is a time for a kind of a revival where the true story comes out in graphic form, true stories, but perhaps dramatized to show what it could have been like. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anirudh, and for bringing that back to the dramatization, because this is an important part of what we're doing here today, and hoping to kind of expand that audience for this history. Poonam, if I could ask you the same question, kind of just your own reflections on this sense of unfree labour and referring to indentured labour as such in your history.
Well, I've heard about a few stories where lie was at the center of narratives, and a lot about exploitation, but then we don't have much on which we can rely on to give it more weight. And I think much of this exploitation has destroyed like quite a few dreams from these indentured laborers also. And therefore, I think there's a big sense of responsibility to tell the stories and to get it to a wider audience as well. But I think there will be much more research to be done on the subject too.
This is a fascinating question, and I've just had a question pop up in my chat about this very subject. I don't know if this is from a historian. But it's for you both, and if I could ask you, Anirudh, to respond first, because you've touched on it. You touched on it just in your prior response. What are the areas that you think? What are the important areas, the key areas now for researchers, for academics and historians, for anyone wanting to go into those archives?
I think what doesn't come out in South African literature are individuals like the story about this person in Guyana. We don't have many of those kind of stories. We don't have court evidence or facts arising from court case. Being a lawyer myself, a barrister, I would want to look at that. But we have an excellent library, a heritage library in Cape Town, where at the turn of the century, skeletons were found at the foot of Table Mountain going down to the harbor. This was a so-called Malay quarter, and they were slaves from Indonesia and Malaya. So there has been a lot of interest. Many of those bones have not been identified yet because they were not like complete skeletons, but scattered about around Cape Town and a former British naval base, Simonstown. So recently there's been an interest in that, but I think one needs to look at that and go back to the first Dutch settlement. Before the first Dutch settlement, in 1647, where slaves were brought from the Bay of Bengal, taken to Indonesia, and dropped off at South Africa at high prices. And many of them married into Dutch families. And some of these families, they don't bear Indian names, but the matrilineal side is Indian. And some of these women were very smart. They owned businesses in Cape Town and so on, and later spread. So there are some characters in my, true characters in my research on the dramatic series, TV drama series. And one needs to expand that. Firstly, write the stories as true stories, and then alongside that, as screenplays. I'm a screenwriter for a local production company. I think that if put on TV as a series, it can really shake people up, because many of us now have read a lot of literature, and it's, sorry to say, to historians and so on, it's the same thing. It's a repetition of each other's story. So there's a great deal of similarity and repetition. Sorry, thank you.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anirudh. Poonam, if I could ask you the same question, and I kind of I was interested kind of before in what you were saying about this being a woman's story from Mauritius, and kind of the possibilities perhaps of unearthing more more narratives that may give us insight into what it was like, particularly for indentured women during this period. What would you hope that researchers, historians, academics might unearth in the archives regarding indenture in Mauritius?
Yes, it's good to talk about that collaboration of historians and writers and so on. But what I would like to see that would come forward is more of life stories, actually, because that speaks a lot. And there is an amount of truth in those stories, and it will give us also a different kind of perspective to what we have been told, because very often it's from a colonial perspective. Sometimes it's from, we have some Indian writing in Hindi also that's there. It's mostly in the form of narratives, but I think life stories could help us to connect the little dots about what we are being said and shown and what we haven't heard yet. So I think it's more about life stories.
Thank you, Poonam, so much. There is an opportunity to, or there will be an opportunity to continue the chat a little bit on Twitter, but for now, it's up to me, I think, to bring this event to a close and to thank you very much, Poonam and Anirudh, for joining us. I know you're both incredibly busy, but we're so grateful you were here today, because it's given us
thank you, Mary,
an added element to the monologue. So many thanks.
Thank you.
I would like to officially now say thank you in the order in which they appeared to Anirudh Singh, Poonam Sitahol and Eddie Nyland. I'd also like to thank the Commonwealth Foundation and the Ameena Gafoor Institute for the study of indentureship and its legacies. And finally, and most especially, thank you, to our global audience, for taking the time to join us today. Thank you very much, and goodbye.